Hey guys, it's Andrew here, back with another TouchDesigner tutorial. What? Today we're going to be making this thing. Um, this was really fun. What you're looking at is a pointer tracing curves, um, driven by easing functions, and it's pretty fun. There's going to be a little bit of GLSL, and yeah. Something fun about this project is that you can, because it's just tracing a curve, you can change the curves as much as you want. Um, for example, I can make it like 1 divided by 10, and then we get something super crazy. You can also like decrease these guys and like get rid of some, or like make this like super big, and then it gets super crazy. But yeah, I think it's pretty fun. And I made this first when the experimental version wasn't out yet, I think. But then once it did come in, Pops actually makes a lot of, or a few of these, like one thing of this project a lot easier. So I brought that into Pops. So make sure you have the experimental version so we can use Pops. Um, if not, don't worry, you can still make most of this in Tops. And yeah, I'd say like if you want practice, try making this in Pops because it's also pretty straightforward in Pops. Aside from that, let's get started, shall we? Before I forget, I'm currently having a Patreon sale, so I'm lowering the prices to $5 and $10. And yeah, if you decide to subscribe, you'll get all of my tutorial files on the lower tier, and then on the higher tier, you'll get a bunch of different goodies like this version of the easing function trail tutorial, which has every single easing function. Look at all of them, so many. And yeah, you can like drag those into your project by like locking the top and yeah. Um, on top of that, there's just going to be a bunch of different versions of my files, like um, this like more post-processed version of my vortex, or like the noisy version of my ASCII art, or like for my attractor tutorial I have one that has color with the trails. um, but yeah, so if you have been following along and you weren't sure if you wanted to subscribe, I think right now would be a great time since it's summer and I feel like everyone right now is probably trying to find things to do. Um, and yeah, hopefully learning TouchDesigner and you know doing that type of stuff is a good summer plan, and I can help out. On top of that, I'm probably going to open a Discord like hopefully by tomorrow after I upload this video, and hopefully you guys can join. Would love to see you guys on the Discord. We can figure out things to do, and yeah, what else? Oh, I might start Twitch streaming as well. I don't know. People keep on asking me about that. That sounds kind of fun. Not entirely sure how that would work, but who knows? Anyways, back to the tutorial. Okay, so start off with a blank patch, and we're gonna close this palette as well. And I'm just going to grab a constant chop first. Then we want to grab points. We'll make that 1,000. And then we're also going to grab a curve, which will be 3. And from there, I'm gonna grab a null, and then I'm just gonna call this like ramp, like so. From there, I'm going to grab a ramp top, and then in this ramp top, I'm gonna go into my common tab, and I'm going to change the points to be, or the resolution X to be 1,000, and I want my resolution Y to just be 1. I want this to be 32-bit float RG. And yeah, next what we want to do is we want to grab a math, and we're going to multiply this entire thing by 360. And then we're going to turn that into a circle by grabbing a function top. And with the function top, what we can do is we can change our red channel to be cosine and our green channel to be sine. So then I'm going to grab a layout. And in this layout, I'm going to do a line bottom to top. I'm going to do a scale resolution on, and I'm going to change the curve to be 3, like so. In between our function and layout, I want to grab a math, and I'm going to just resize the circle by multiplying it by 0.1. And then finally, we can end that with a null and call that curves. Like so. Now, if we click on this viewer active and then right click view as points, you'll see that there is a single circle. Now, because our layout has max rows of 3, that means we can add 2 more curves. And the way I'm going to do that is by grabbing a ramp. And with this ramp, you can do whatever you'd like, but I'm just going to keep it simple for now. And we're just going to grab this, we're going to bring that into the middle. I'm going to click on this last notch that I made, and I'm going to make this 0. And then I'm going to make the period 1/4, like so. And if we connect it, you'll see we have our second curve. And then we can grab another ramp, and you can play around with this as much as you like. I'll just do something like, I don't even know. I'll make this entire thing 1, and I'll make these, I'll add some in between, like so. And I'll make the period like 1/2. And I'll connect that into my layout as well. And there we go. Okay, so now we have our curves, but they're all stacked on top of each other. So what we want to do is we want to actually spread them out. And the way we can do that is by grabbing another ramp top. And in this ramp top, we want our type to be vertical. And then in our common tab, I'm going to change the X resolution to be 1. And I'm going to grab the curve to be my Y. Then in my pixel format, I'm going to change this to be 32-bit float RG as well. And then I'm going to grab a reorder like so. And I'm going to change the red input to be 0. So now it's just going to displace our green channel or our Y. And I'm going to add that to my layout like so. Make sure that the add is in the first input, and then we connect it like so. And you'll see right now it's a bit wonky, and that's because we have to go into our common tab and then change our smoothness to be nearest pixel, like so. Now, maybe those are a bit too spread out, so what we can do is we can go into our, a point transform. And with this point transform, I'm just going to do, like, I don't know. Actually, that's fine. Let's just move this into the center, like so. Okay, so now that we have our curves, I'm going to turn on my viewer active again, and I'm going to view this as an image. And I'm going to convert this into tops with a top to pop. And then in our first drop-down menu, I'm going to change this to be position and active. And there we have it. Next, what we can do is we can grab a null. We can turn on this viewer active, or this display. And then I'm going to split the pane. And then I'm going to, in my second drop-down, I'm going to do geometry viewer. And then I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and then I'm going to do right click, make sure adaptive homing is off, and then we can do home all. And now we have a nice view of our curves. So now that we have our curves, I'm going to just select this ramp, and what we're going to do is we're going to make our easing function that will drive the pointer that runs along the curve. And we can do that by just grabbing a GLSL. And then with that GLSL, well, you can edit it in here, but I'm going to edit it in my text editor just by clicking on that. And yeah, I found this website and it just gives off all of the easing functions. And so you can just copy and paste them and put them into your project. I'm going to grab the ease in, ease out elastic because I think that one's like the most fun. And I'm just going to add that right above our void main. And yeah, now one thing is that this doesn't have our pi defined, so I'm going to change that real quick. So float pi is equal to 3.1415 926. So, and then yeah, from there, what we can do is just grab this this line of code, and we're gonna use the x value as our domain. So I'm gonna call this domain, and then get rid of this, and then we can put our float y is equal to the ease in, ease out elastic, and then just call domain.x. So, and then on the output, what we could do is we can just output effect4, which is just domain.x, and then we can get y, and then we can get 0, and then 1, like so. And now if we go into our GLSL, you'll notice here that it's changed, and we have our easing function, just like so. Super, super great. Now, with this, what we can do is this, it's nice to look at, but we only need the y value. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a reorder, and we're going to change this to be green, like so. And then we're going to grab a transform, like so. And we're going to call this abs times dot seconds. And in the tile, I want this to be repeat. And that might be a bit fast, so I'm going to divide that by 4. And then I'm going to grab a crop. And with this crop, I'm going to do pixel, pixel. And I only want 1 pixel. And yeah, so now we have a value to drive a displacement. One thing before we do that though is I'm going to multiply this entire easing function with the amount of points that we have, which is just 1,000, like so. Now that we have that, I'm going to bring that down like so, and I'm going to grab my curves. So, oh, and if you ever see me turning off this window right here, I'm just pressing P. So by grabbing our curves, what we can do now is we can add a displace like so, and we can funnel our crop into the second input like so. And yeah, the displace weight though has to be specific, otherwise this isn't going to work. I want my extend to be just repeat just in case, and then the displace weight is equal to our points amount. It's going to be equal to 1 over our points like so, and then we want to divide that entire thing by 2. The displace y we can just set to be 0 like so, and then we can grab another crop and set these also to pixels, so 0 1, and then from there we can grab a null and we can call this our pointers. And then if we turn on US points, what you can see very, very, like, closely are our pointers that are running around our curve. And this will look a lot more clear once we bring this into pops. I can do that here with a pop to top, or top to pop. And same thing, RGBA. And what we can do is we can grab a circle. I'm going to set this to be 0.05, 0.05, 0.05. And then I'm going to make the connectivity a surface. And then we're going to copy like so. And then we can merge this together. And yay. Okay, those are still ginormous, so like that, a bit smaller. Yeah, there we go. And now we have our pointer. Yay! Okay, now with the pointer done, we're going to make our trails. And the way we do that is we can just grab another select. And then with this select, we're going to select our pointers. And yeah, we're going to crop this. But before we do that, I'm going to change my select 3 in the comment tab to be RGBA because I want the alpha channel now. And with the crop, I'm going to make it 0 for our extend. And then for our points, for our crop right, we just want our points, like so. And now what we want to do is we want to essentially create a feedback loop. So grab a feedback, grab a constant, grab a keyboard in, and then we're gonna drag that into here. And then we are going to grab a over, like so, and then put the crop in here. And drag the over into our feedback, and then we're going to grab a null and then call that trail, like so. Now what we want to do is we want to I'm going to turn the viewer active on for the trail, and I'm going to view it as points. And you'll see that we still have our 3 dots, but they're frozen because the feedback, we're currently not running anything in it. And so what we want to do is we want to grab a transform, and we want to go into the translate and change this into pixels, and we just want this to be 1, like so. And now that it's 1, you can see that it's doing our little trail thing. Now the thing is, though, is that it's staying in the same place, and we don't want that. So what do we want to do instead? Well, I'm going to move that all over here, and I'm going to grab a ramp. And with this ramp, I'm going to, in between my transform and my over, I'm going to add a reorder. And then with this reorder, I'm going to grab this ramp and set it to my second input, like so. And we want this ramp output to just be set resolution only. And then I just want my red channel to be our input 2, like so. And there you go. We have our trails. Now, one thing that we might want to do is, well, actually, I'll do that in a bit. Let's convert this into pops and add it to our geometry. So same thing, top to pop, and then we want to do position and active, and then I'm just going to merge this as well. Okay, so a few things. So the first thing is that you'll notice that the trail starts at the same location as our the trail starts off at the same location as our origin. like 0, 0. So what we can do is in this ramp right here, or sorry, not this ramp, right before this over, we can add a point transform. And with this point transform, we can just translate this a bit over, like so. I'm just gonna do like 2.5. Well, 2.5. Yeah. The next thing is you'll notice that we have this floating trail or this floating pointer now. And we don't want that. We want that pointer to basically exist where our actual pointer is. And so what we can do is we can grab this beginning crop and we can put that over like so. And there it goes. Now it's gone. Now, the next thing, which is the only thing that's like really pops about this patch, but it makes it so much easier, is you'll notice that when we are, going up and down, there is a problem with the way that it's moving too fast. So there's not enough points being made. And we can fix that with a proximity. But also, if your computer is like a bit laggy, or like not as good as, a gaming computer, make sure to put the proximity first. Because these are a lot of points and a lot of connections. So it might crash your PC. But what we want to do is, I think we want to just do one number of hash buckets as one. Maximum distance, I think, is 0.3. And that should be good. I think so. Yeah. Now, yeah, one thing to note though is we will end up getting a bit of like connections at the very end, but that's okay because the camera, you can just sort of move it so you don't have to see that part. But yeah, that's about it. There you go. If you want to adjust it, because something like this might happen where it breaks, you can just increase it like so. Or another thing that you can do is you can go into this point transform and then just make it move closer. But yeah, up to you. Anyways, with that all being said and done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this into a geometry. I'm also going to turn off all the viewer actives for these pops. And I'm going to grab a camera. I'm going to grab a constant material. And then I'm going to grab a render. I'm going to set this to be 1080 by 1080. And with our camera, I'm just going to change the view to be orthographic. I'm going to change the ortho width to be 1. And I'm going to do a null. I'm going to do a transform. The transform, I'm just going to do background color 1 and then comp over background color so. And now we can go into our top viewer, turn this on like so, right click, go into display, turn off backdrop tops, and you can also, let's see, move this to the left a bit, and there we have it. Wow! Okay, so now that we have our trails, I'm just gonna add a bit more pre-processing, post-processing to get it to a nice glow, because right now it's black and white and all the lines are the same thickness. So yeah. Okay, so now that we have all of this, the first thing that I want to do is I want to give color to my trails. And so the way that we can do that is we can grab a noise, and I'm just gonna make this noise a 1:3 texture, like so. And with this noise, I want this to be monochrome off, and I'm gonna display pixel so that it looks, not interpolated. And yeah, I'm just gonna increase the amplitude. Like, these are pretty good colors, so I'm gonna keep it like that, and we're gonna crop this by 1,000, like so. And so now what we want, right, is we want every single row to be attributed to our trail. And so what we want to do then is, well, I'm going to add a null, and I'm going to call this color. And so since there's 3 of these in our pop, right? If I grab a math mix, I can go and I can grab just the point index, and this point index will be from 0 to 2,999, but every single 1,000 moves on to the next, right? And so what we can do is we can grab a mod, if I can find it. Mod right here. And what we want to do is we can make this our horizontal index, like so. And we can call this mod 1,000, like so. Next, what we want to do is we also want to give a vertical index. And so for our vertical index, what we want to do is we want to also grab we want to do some division. So what we want to do is we want to give our point index like so. And then what we want to do is we want to do, I believe it should be divided by 1,000 as well. And we can call this vertical index like so. And now if we look into a pop dat and we just go into horizontal and vertical, you'll notice that we have all of these like so. And then, yeah, and then once we move on to our next row, our 1 increases like so. So yeah, think of this as our horizontal, right? This is like the first row, and then once we hit 1, right, that's our second row. Now, because these are all decimals, though, that means that we also need to add one more operation, which is our floor, and this floor will floor the vertical index, and there we go. Now we have all of our trail information organized. So once we do that, what we can do is we can grab a lookup texture like so. And all we want to do is we just want to do our lookup U as horizontal index, and then our lookup V as our vertical index. And then we just want to bring our color in, and we want this to be pixel index, and then we want this to be our color. And there we go. Once we have that, we can just, change these however we like. After that, what we can do is we can also use this same texture to basically give us our pointer colors as well. And I want these to be the same color. So what we can do is in our copy, there is should be somewhere to output. Yeah, okay. There's somewhere to output template ID. And so we can just do a point like so. And we'll just have to look at how many divisions there are. And so if we go into another pop 2 and we just extract our template ID, you'll notice that our template ID has all of our circles sort of organized. So 0, 1, and 2. And it's just an easier way to do what I just did, but it's just natively in copy. And so we can grab another lookup texture, like so. And we can just use, we won't be using our U, but for our P1, we can do template ID. And again, we want our pixel index. And then this time we can just use, well, you can also use color, I think. And then we can output that as color. And look at that. There we go. Okay, so one thing that I don't like is that the pointer is behind the wire, or the curve. So what we can do is in our circles right before our lookup texture, we're going to add a math. And with this math, we're just going to get our z direction. And I'm just going to add 0.01 or 0.05. Yeah, that should be good. Like so. Okay. Now another thing is I want my trails to be a bit longer. So in my constant, I went into the common tab and I just did a wireframe. And with the wireframe, what I can do is I can increase the size. Like so. Now another thing that you'll notice though is that our curve doesn't actually move along with it. And so we can fix that just by grabbing another copy, another circle, and another copy, like so. And with this, we want, same thing, surface. We want our radius to be maybe like 0.005, 0.005, and like that. And there we have it. Now that's a bit too thick, so I'm gonna make that even smaller. But yeah. Now the last thing that we can do is we can add a bloom. And with this bloom, what we can do is, I don't know, just like play around with it. I honestly don't know how to, make this look as great. It's just experimentation. But yeah. You can also like change the color. Maybe get it a bit closer. Let me see, what else can I move? Yeah, like give it a little like neon sign type of glow. And yeah, but yeah, I think aside from that, what we can also do maybe is like, well, this is really up to you, but like you can make anything you like. Like it doesn't matter what you can create. It will always trace it. So you can go like as crazy as you want. Just, if you make it a bit bigger, just watch out because if it's like too high up, it might connect to the other part. Um, Sometimes it does that. But like, you can make it like 1/10, and then that like gets really crazy, or like 1/50, and then that's just insane on its own. Another thing to note is that you can also copy this layout situation. You can copy this layout situation the same way with the easing functions, where you can add just like you can add a layout here in between our or here, I'll just copy this layout right here and disconnect these wires. But with these ones, you know, you could do the same thing. You can copy all three of them and, you know, pretend that these are just two other like easing functions that you wanted to use, and then you could put that into here, and then you would just get a 3x1, and then each of them would push the pointer in a different type of way. Yeah, lots of fun things to experiment here. But that's pretty much the tutorial. Thanks for watching my tutorial. Hopefully you learned something and this was easy to follow. If you like what I do and want to support me, consider dropping a like, leaving a comment, subscribing, following me on Instagram, checking out my Patreon, the whole shebang. If you subscribe to me on Patreon, you'll get my tutorial file, you'll get this file, you also get the a whole bunch of other files that all have like, you know, cool post-processing or just like different variations of the tutorials that I make. But yeah, I will see you guys next time. Okay, bye.